we're doing a recap of what we've been talking about, and what we've really been talking about is overcoming the fear of freedom. And this message really derived from First Joshua 1, verses 7 through 9. So if somebody want to get there and read that, I mean, I can almost know it verbatim to a certain extent.
Above all, be strong and very courageous, to observe carefully the whole instruction my servant Moses commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right or the left, so that you will have success wherever you go. This book of instruction must not depart from your mouth. You are to meditate on it day and night, so that you may carefully observe everything written in it. For then you will prosper and succeed in whatever you do. Have not commanded you, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go.
Good. So the funny thing is how did this scripture come about? And well, they know that, and I'm talking mostly to CJ today, getting caught up on some things. I was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer in December of 2017, and while I'm going through this, there's a man by the name of Sean Gills at my job who has just been encouraging me throughout the year. Just a lot of things going on, and he's just been there. He's been my Barnabas, and just encouraging me. And through his encouragement, he actually sent me this text message while I was recovering from surgery to remove the cancer. And it was this, and after I read it, he just really sent me Joshua 1:9, but I read those first two verses. And what it did, I had already started doing what we were doing now. And in the midst of doing a lot of things, honestly, it's easy to get discouraged, right? It's when you start doing something, especially when God has instructed you to do something, you come to a point where you're like, you know what, God, this doesn't make sense to me. I don't even know if I should be doing this. The enemy starts lying to you and telling you that all the things that are transpiring that's not going right in your life is because you're doing something wrong. And we all know that he's the father of all lies. So he just comes to lie to us and discourage us from doing what God has called us to do. But you start questioning, that's the human part of walking this out. And so in the midst of going through that, I read this passage of scripture, and it really just it ignited a fire in me to say, you know what, Lord. And I like if Alicia, anybody, if y'all read just verse 9. Just if you read, I think it started to say, have I not?
Yeah, haven't I commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go.
And so when I read verse 9, and this Bible makes it, is in the King James Version and the NIV, it says, have I not, like as if God he's talking directly to Joshua. So he's coming to Joshua like, listen, it's like if you're talking to your children, you like, listen, didn't I tell you? And that's how God coming to Joshua like, listen, didn't I tell you that I need you to be strong and courageous? So when I started going through, like, okay, Lord, what's the next sermon series you want me to start on? So I'm seeking him, and then it comes to, he says, well, the fear of freedom. Like, what do you mean by that? It's like, well, I talk to people at my job all the time about the fear of success. And so this is kind of the same thing. So when I say the fear of freedom is that a lot of people want to be free in areas of their lives, but the fear that takes place in order to get to that place of being free is that you have to be strong enough to say, you know what, I can't do this on my own. And I think that's the essence of understanding God, because in our human frailty, we think that strength sometimes is resistance, right? But sometimes strength is also having the ability to relinquish, you know what I'm saying, and say, you know what, Lord, I'm going to give you free reign. I'm going to give you control over this, and I have to be strong enough to know and have enough faith in you that I know that you can come in and you can do the work. And really, every time I think about this, me and my wife at our previous church did this Bible study, what was the guy's name? I can't think of his name, but what was this? I can't. It was. It's not what you think. It's not what you think. That was the name of the lesson. But we dove in it even more. And part of what he was talking about is he was talking about not what you think. He was talking about Christianity and how people view Christianity. But one of the parts he dealt with was the wounds in our life. And he talked about how a lot of times if we don't allow Jesus to come in and clean out those wounds and allow them to heal, if a wound's not cleaned out, it becomes infected, right? And when things become infected, gangrene kicks in, all these other things, it become life-threatening. So a lot of times for us, we have spiritual life-threatening wounds that we don't allow God to come in and heal because we're afraid that if we allow him to touch that area, that I don't know what it is. I guess I would have to say that, and I can say in my own personal life, I've had those areas in my life. And I think what it is that we as in our human mindset and in humanity, we know that change is inevitable, but we don't want to deal with it. We don't want to accept the fact that in order to move forward in anything, change has to take place. And when it comes to spiritual growth and spiritual change, in order for change to take place, thank you, hallelujah. In order for change to take place in anything, there has to be some level of vulnerability. That makes sense. And we have to be willing to be vulnerable enough to allow Christ to come in and begin to make that change. Well, vulnerability means that we have to be willing to let something down, or to put something aside, or open up that gate, or break down that wall. Well, in order to become vulnerable, we have to be willing to put forth the work to allow vulnerability. So if there's a gate, right? Like, so say if I come to your house, right, and you know that I'm coming to your house, and I'm coming to your home, and there's a gate, right? But I don't have the code to that gate. And you see me, you look, let's say you got a mansion or whatever. I come to the gate. I don't have the access code to get in. So you have to be willing enough to allow me in. Now, let's not say you actually know me. Let's say you don't know me at all. Let's say that I'm the TV repairman or something, right? And the age that we live in now, why do we have security, right? To protect us from the unknown, correct? So you have to really be willing to relinquish the security that you've already put up in place to keep people from harming you, to allow me to come in to fix something that's wrong. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So a lot of times, Jesus is that TV repairman at the gate that we know he's coming. Hallelujah. We know he's coming, but we don't know him, right? Because the cable company calls you and tells you, hey, listen, we sending out our technician. They may even tell you his name. Nowadays, they'll send you a text message. Maybe his picture is on there. And you're like, okay, Richard Johnson is coming to fix my cable. I know what he looks like, everything. But I don't know Richard Johnson, right? So when he gets there, the first thing you do when he comes, you trying to look to make sure that that's a Spectrum band, right? You like, all right, that's the band, And because why? Why are you checking, dotting these I's and crossing these T's? The reason is because if a person from Spectrum is supposed to be coming and a Frontier band shows up, something's wrong, right? Well, why don't we do the same thing in our lives? Why don't we do this in our own spiritual lives? If my life, my heart, my mind is what I'm protecting, I should be guarding. The Bible says guard your heart and mind, right? Through Christ Jesus. So if we're supposed to be guarding our heart and mind, there's supposed to be this level of security that exists around our hearts and our minds, why is it that we allow people into our lives without taking them through that same security check? Because when that guy pulls up, I'm asking, who are you here? I can see the van. It don't matter. Even if you see the side of the van, you want like, this you Richard Johnson? Yes, I am. Can I see some ID? He's gonna have to take his thing off, show you into that he Richard Johnson. But the sad thing is, we don't do this in our personal life with our emotional, our mental state. But another thing that we do is that the funny thing is, God is good. Why do we scrutinize Jesus so much? Why do we, if we know what Jesus came to do, we know he came to set us free, right? He said, I came to set the captive free. But when he comes to set you free, we almost do everything in our power to keep him from coming inside the gate. We give him a harder time than we give the very people that we allow in our life all the time. And here it is, he came to give you eternal life. Not only eternal life, but to give you life more abundantly here on the earth. But we'll let people in without less scrutiny than we let Jesus in. And we see this, and this is all the time. Think about when you're ready to talk to somebody about God. Oh man, here you go. Then start talking about the Bible, right? Or, man, I don't feel like going to church today. But We'll sit up and watch a night show with Jimmy Kimmel, and he could be talking all kind of crazy stuff, and we don't sit and reject that. That is the essence of our sin nature. That what's good for us, we block and we keep honest, even with food, right? In order to have a healthy diet, there are things you got to eat that you may not be too fond of, and there's things you got to cut out, right? And so when we think about our sin nature, and you have to go back, CJ, and watch the first series I did, which was called Allow Me to Reintroduce Myself. And it was really focusing on our full understanding of who God is and how he's always been to us instead of how we assume he is to us right now. And so what we usually do is the things that are good for us, we push away. The things that aren't so good for us or we think are good for us, we allow in, right? So we allow that person into the gate. Once they pass the security check, they in, right? Now, usually if somebody coming to repair something, they're going to have to move some stuff out of the way, right? If something is wrong, they got to go move this, they got to open up that, they got to go through a system check, right? So a lot of times in order for Jesus to come in and begin to remove the things out of our lives that has us bound and keeping us from really being free, we have to allow him to come in and move some things out the way. And a lot of times, I don't know about y'all, and I'm pretty sure everybody's experienced, we've all at one time had somebody come install cable, put something up, been in somebody's house, right? It's a bunch of drilling, hammering, all this noise, right? But why do we endure it? Why do we endure the interruption into our lives? Why do we endure the drilling, the holes, the cables being pulled? You know why? Because we want cable. I want to be able to watch TV. I need access to something. So if God comes in and he says, listen, I'm going to have to drill some holes because there's some things that I need to gain access to. There's some cables I need to put in you. There's some reception I need to get in order so you can fully receive me and who I am. Just like it ain't fun to watch somebody drill a hole through your wall and pull a cable through, it's not fun to allow Jesus to come in and start drilling holes in your life and start saying, look, you right here you need help. Right here I need to connect you here. I need to connect you there. So if we looked at our sin nature, and the best way for me to always explain this to people, y'all can use this too when I'm trying to share Christ with people. They say, well, I don't see the reason why, you know what I'm saying, I need to accept Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior, or why I need God to forgive me. So the simplest way that I usually explain this to people, say, listen, you ever had your TV sent somewhere and the closest receptacle is on the other side of the wall, or it's too far away from the actual plug that actually goes to the TV? And like, yeah, what do? You do two things, right? Either you move the TV closer to the plug, or you get what? An extension cable, right? Jesus came to be that extension cable. Jesus came to make the connection so we can plug into the source. So what you are without Christ is you're just a television sitting there, or an appliance sitting there with no power. And an appliance without power is useless. And so you've gone through the majority of your life being useless. And I'm not saying you're useless. I'm saying in a spiritual sense where it actually matters, you're not really plugged into the source. You can't really have power until you plug into that source. And even if you move the TV, guess what? The TV made an adjustment for the source. The source doesn't make an adjustment for the TV. And what we want to do is we want to be able to take, like, you know, in the cartoon, you ever seen a cartoon where they actually move the whole entire plug or the wall in order to get closer? That's what we want to do, but that's not reality. Reality is that we move closer to the source. The source will never move closer to us because the source is away. It's already foundated. God is already foundated. So what we have to realize is that when God comes in and he begins to want to plug in and create a way for us to grow and a way for us to be free, we got to be strong enough, and I'm going back to my scripture, we got to be strong enough to say, you know what, I relinquish, I surrender. And so the first thing we really talked about is oppressional growth. Now, y'all, YouTube, y'all, did you see the first one?
From this one?
Yeah. Okay. All right. So what I want to do is I want you guys, like, so let's talk about that. So when I say oppressional growth, what comes to mind? I mean, I know y'all watched it, but when you heard that, how do you perceive that?
When you first said it, before you started explaining it, I was thinking like how even here in America, when we were under slavery, how it seems like we still were grown and we still kind of clung even more to our religions or our rituals or whatever you want to call it, and we started moving more, which I feel like is why things. Same thing with the Israelites. Like, right track.
No, you're fine. There's no right track. This is your observation. So there's no right and wrong right now. Go ahead.
But pretty much, like, when you're under oppression, it kind of makes you seek something else out, like, I feel like bigger than yourself too.
Okay.
Because you kind of get to, I mean, you can only take it for so long before you get to that point where you're just like, all right, either something got to give or I'm out of here. Like,
Okay. Jazz?
What I feel that oppresses?
No, not oppressed.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. So when you heard the terminology oppression growth, I've never heard that terminology.
First series.
Okay.
So that,
Okay.
so I don't know.
Okay, so but when you hear it, even if you've never seen them, ask CJ the same question. If somebody says oppressional growth, what comes to mind? All right. Yes, Julissa.
Depression?
Okay.
Okay.
CJ.
Personal growth is the need growth. When it first came around, was the ability to grow and progress.
Good.
So what you may be going through some hardships and like being able to kind of grow to
Good. And that a part of what Alicia said and what you said is what that is, and it's very good. So when we think about being able to grow under pressure, this is where a lot of people don't grow. And honestly, that ability to grow is really the essence of being able to truly grow. Because if we think about the church grew under pressure. The church grew under oppression, right? From Roman Empire, the Jewish synagogue and the leaderships of that day, they still grew. So now how do you get to that point of saying, you know what, even though I'm under pressure, even though I'm being oppressed, how do I grow in the midst of that? So what I went into is that oppression comes in two ways, right? You either choose oppression or oppression chooses you. When you're talking about slavery, as far as African Americans, or you're talking about the Israelites, it was pressed upon them, right? Then the hardest part, and when I was doing it, I'm like, so people always assume that what we choose is best for us, right? So like we like, oh, if I chose this, it's gonna turn out the way I want it to be. Usually that's not how it works out, right? So when the oppression that we choose, we don't ever see it become an oppression. And one of the notes that I put in here is that we usually enter into things without thinking about how we're going to get out of it. We enter into relationships without thinking about, I may need a way out of this one day. We enter into business opportunities, not even thinking about, I may need a way out of this one day. All kind of things. And if we don't go into something with the knowing that there may be a necessity for an exit strategy, we can become oppressed and possibly possessed by a situation. I'm not, as believers, technically, if we truly under the blood of Christ, we should not be demon possessed. We can be oppressed by a spirit, but we can't be possessed by a spirit because that void has already been filled by Christ. So when we put ourselves in a position, now when you talk about possession, to have full control, right? We allow situations and circumstances in our lives to have full control over us. So we can be possessed by relationships, we can be possessed by religion, we can be possessed by jobs, by success, by greed. Why? Because it clouds our judgment. It becomes it becomes the unnecessary necessity. Does that make sense? So we don't need it, but because we are now been beyond the part of being oppressed, because the oppression is the constant pressure of that particular thing pressing down on you. So once it comes to the point that it's no longer pressing down on you, but it has become you, that's the dangerous part, because now you're in a position of being possessed by that particular thing. Now, long as there is a willingness to be strong and courageous, you can fight whatever that is. So even if you say, well, how can you fight in the midst of slavery? Sometimes fighting is just getting up, doing what you got to do without letting what's going on around you affect you. And the best way, and I think I said this when I was teaching this, the only way to grow under oppression is to have the right filter. Does that make sense? Like, what happens is if for the Israelites, and you can go back into the book of Genesis, especially looking at the story of Joseph. Joseph already had saw what God had. He saw his brothers bowing down to him, right? So when we look at Joseph's story, when he told them that, they immediately did what? They oppressed him. They sold him into slavery. He was a slave in Potiphar's house. Now think about this, and this is what I love about Joseph. My brothers, and I implore y'all to do this. This will help you grow. When you read the Word of God, don't just read the Word to gain the knowledge of the information. See the human side of what's going on in that individual, because that's where the true encouragement is at. If I look at Joseph and I say, man, here's a guy who at 15, 16, 17 years old was sold into slavery by his own brothers. I want y'all to just think about that for a minute. Like, my family sells me into slavery because they're upset. Like, that'd be like if CJ went to his, I don't know if you got siblings or not, but how many you got? 5. All right, cool. You're a little short of what Joseph had. He had 9 because he was the 10, because he was the 11, and then the younger brother came later after he was gone. So you go to your 5 siblings, you like, listen, I had a dream. The Lord showed me that all of y'all gonna be working for me one day. And you like, what? Yeah, y'all all gonna work for me one day. They gonna feel some type of way about that. Now they ain't gonna sell you into slavery, but especially if you're the youngest. And that's the thing. Here it is. This is our baby brother telling us that we are gonna bow down to him. We gonna kneel to him. They got hot by that. So they sell him into slavery. He becomes a slave. He's in Potiphar's house. Now, for most of us, you know what we did? Let's just be honest. We'd been walking around with the wars me attitude. And what's on right now? I bet my mom, she cooking, dad missing me, my brother's probably acting like I'm still dead. Like, he could have been, and I'm not saying these things weren't going on in his mind, but what was the difference? This says that Joseph became the chief servant under Potiphar. So his mindset was this: even though I'm in slavery, what God promised me in that dream, it's still gonna happen. And what we usually do is, because we oppress, we relinquish the promise. And we say, you know what, it's no way in the world I'm gonna get to the palace if I just got pulled out of the pit. People always preach that, from the palace to the pit, and it sounds good, it does, it's a great thing. But what people usually don't deal with is that, what was the mindset of the man who was coming out of the pit? And how does that affect us? Because we all go through our personal pits in life. And then when we're in those pits, if we do not have the right state of mind to deal with what's going on in those pits, we begin to allow the pit, the atmosphere of the pit, to create a bigger pit inside of us. So if I'm in the pit, and I let the fact that I can't, if I'm in a pit, right, and usually a pit means that you underground, there's an open space, but you can't see what's going on around you up there, right? Hallelujah. So if I'm in that situation, what does it take for me to keep moving forward and not allow that to affect me? What do you guys have? Faith. You gotta have faith, because that's what, when we talking about faith, it's like, so when I got diagnosed, my wife was, she was going through it, rightfully so. And I'm sitting in there and I'm like, okay, what we got to do? And even the doctor looking at me like, I just told you got cancer, and you just straight face looking at me. You know why? I was in a pit. Not a pit I chose, not a pit that I wanted to be in, but what I knew is that I had been in other pits in my life, right? And every time I was in that pit, I couldn't see what was going on above me or around me. I just knew when I looked straight up, there was a light coming down on me, and I know who created that light. And the same God that created that light is the same God that can pull me out of this pit. And that's the way we have to have when it comes to being oppressed or finding ourselves in an oppressed state, is that I'm in a pit right now. And everything around me is dark, it's muddy, it's nasty, it smells, I don't like it. But every time I look up, there's that light. And I know who made that light. And I know where that light comes from. And that same God that put that sun and that moon in the sky, while I'm sitting down here in this pit, is the same God that can pull me out of this pit. And that was Joseph's mindset. So even when he got pulled out of the pit, sold into slavery, rolled in the cage however long he did to get to Egypt, to Potiphar's house, he walked in there and his mindset was, you know what? I was in a pit. Now I'm in a palace. I'm still a slave, but I'm not in a pit anymore. So sometimes for us, especially with the Israelites and with and with us as in African Americans in slavery, we got to know deep down inside that there's an end that's going to come to whatever situation or circumstance that we find ourselves in. But what's going to be at the end of that end? Is it going to be the fulfillment of the promise that God gave us? Or are we going to find ourselves in a situation where we're missing out on actually getting to that promise? Because what does sin mean? Sin means to miss the mark, right? It means to not be accurate. I mean, that's where it comes from in the Greek. It means to actually be inaccurate. So when we're inaccurate in our thinking, when we're inaccurate in our emotions and our approach and how we deal with things, we put ourselves in a position to actually miss that promise. And we allow the oppression that we find ourselves in to begin to dictate our decision making, our choices, and the things we go through. And so we hinder our growth. So another thing I talked about, we talked about the oppressional part. So when we talk about growth, when y'all hear the word growth, because to me this is like one of the biggest things to me. When you hear growth, what do you think?
Shooting up.
Okay. Growth.
Growth. A mistake you learn from.
Okay.
Growth.
Okay. CJ. Wait a minute, can you say that again? Gaining some form of strength or energy. Okay, I like that. For me, and all those things are right. Growth is what takes place when I don't allow opposition to hinder me. Because when a seed is planted in the ground, it's being opposed. It's opposed to the light. It's opposed to the dark, everything. But what happens? In order for a seed to grow, the hole around the seed has to die, right? Once that happens, then the seed starts to break through a little bit. You see that little green part? What we realize, how we miss out when we're trying to grow in Christ is that every little bad thing that comes to push us down, every little bit of oppression that comes, every bit of pressure, every bit of disappointment, neglect, letdown, church hurt, whatever it is, if we don't filter right, we allow that seed. God is trying to plant that seed in us. And I'm telling y'all, this is from me personally, from my own personal life. I've had to learn to overcome all of those things in order to continue to move forward. Because if I were to let all those things stop me, hold me back, even right now, I wouldn't be standing here. So the biggest thing is when you're going through oppression or growth is to first of all recognize that this is an opportunity. It's an opportunity. The Israelites saw their oppression by the Egyptians as an opportunity, no matter, even though they tried to kill the kids, all these type of things, everything they tried to do, it was an opportunity. Everything you're going through in your own personal life, backlash, backbiting, backstabbing, people hating on you, people, all of those things, they're opportunities. They're opportunities for you to get stronger, to create the energy that you need in order to move forward, to overcome the hardship, the hurt, the pain, all those things. But it's all about the filter. If I'm filtering wrong, it's like a brittle water, like a water filter, right? It's to block all the extra unnecessary minerals that you don't need in the water so the water comes out clean and smooth, right? So you have filters or air conditioner filter, whatever. So some filters are based upon permeability, right? The amount of letting something in or out, right? So if you got a filter like this, nothing can get in, nothing get out. So technically it's not a filter, it's a wall, right? Because a filter without anything that's straight and flat, without holes, is just a wall, right? So how many of us in our lives, there's certain places where there's just walls? Nothing can come in, nothing can go out. And then there are certain things where there's small little holes that things can barely pass through, right? Only the smallest particles can pass through, right? And then there's other things where you got large gaping holes like this where you can pour Kool-Aid through it, right? The thing that happens is this: if we consistently walk around with walls guarding our heart, walls guarding our mind, how can anything get in? How can anything get out? Because what we don't realize is when we go into a state of oppression, and we begin to put up blockades around us to try what we think is protecting us. Because one thing I've learned about life is that protection can easily become bondage. The same wall you build to protect you can be the same wall that holds you captive.
Right.
So, you paralyze you. Yeah. And if we're not careful, we can't grow because there's nothing new coming in, there's nothing old going out. And so we find ourselves in a position where we can't grow at all. If you take something and you put it, you take, even a fish underwater has to have a filter in order to let fresh water in, right? Because if you let that fish stay in that same water from the time you got it from the fair to a couple of days, I leave him in that bag too long, he's gonna die, right? Because there's no fresh water, there's nothing fresh coming in. So we have to realize that, and that's what God does. God comes in and he begins to open up that filter, begins to give us an opportunity to breathe a little bit. And as we begin to take those breaths, whether they be small or great, growth starts to happen. That's how our lungs grow. That's how everything grows. There has to be something going in and out. Even our bodies are made like that. We take in, we let out. We take in, we let out. Because if we don't, we can become, sorry to use this, constipated. And and people who are full of crap can't grow at all. You know what I'm saying? Because they hinder themselves. So that's one thing about oppressional growth. So that's that. So the next thing is, so we went from there, and then that was part one. So part two, so everybody good on understanding how to kind of, okay, cool, don't get constipated. So, so part two dealt with obligational growth. So I'm gonna ask y'all the same thing, but I'm gonna go reverse. I'm gonna let you go last. So CJ, when you hear obligational growth, what do you think?
Obligational growth is growing when you have a task to do something, or when you feel the need to do something, being able to grow at that time.
Good.
Well, I had something. It wasn't those exact words, but so obligational growth to me is like, did you say that, sorry? When you feel the need to do something, so you pretty much try to figure out how you can do that, and you grow by figuring out how to.
Okay, I see that point of view. I get that one, Jazz.
Obligation. When you have an obligation, you gotta grow from. So, what does it mean?
Mm-hmm.
Trying to put it into words is hard.
Okay, cool. All right, cool.
I think obligation has to, when you're given something, you know, when you're given something to do, you have an obligation.
Okay.
You know, a lot of times you may not want to do that task, and I guess that's where your faith comes from. You know, does that make sense? Like,
No, that makes sense. Yeah.
you know, you're given something to do, and you're obligated now. And a lot of times people, it's uncomfortable, you know, and sometimes it has to. You got to get out of that comfort, you know, zone that you're in and do what you need to do. So it's an obligation, but it also, in order to complete that obligation, also, it takes faith, in a sense, to step into. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, it's good. So, all of those things are absolutely right.
Julissa wanted to say something.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm glad
No,
to see it.
you sure?
I'm glad to see it.
You sure?
I'm good.
Okay, all right. So, all of those things are right. So, obligated. So, let's look at the first word, obligated. Obligated. And I have the definition here. So it says the binding power of vow, a promise or oath of contract or of law, civil, political, moral, independent of promise, that which constitutes a legal moral duty and which renders a person liable to concur. Then let's see, what's the other one I got here? citizen under obligation to obey the law of the state. Moral obligation binds a man without promise or contract. So, how I saw this is this, and this is how we grow in the midst of an obligation. So let's say this, and you guys all said like you have a responsibility to something you have to do. So, as a parent, you're obligated to take care of your kids, right? At your job, there are certain things that you're obligated to do, right? One thing you're obligated to do when you show up to work every day is do what? You got to clock in. That's an obligation, right? You can be mad, you can be upset, you can hate your boss, you can have a worst day. Don't clock in, and all that frustration you had is worth nothing because you don't get paid. As a parent, you can dislike your children, can't stand them, think they're the worst things in the world. Do something wrong to them, and I guarantee you your obligation to be staying alive in prison. Right? So the thing is that obligations are usually responsibilities that are tied to something without negotiation. Does that make sense? When you obligated to something, my wife cannot negotiate the care that she has for our daughter. You cannot negotiate the necessity of clocking in at your job. It's just a requirement, right? Because if you don't clock in, you don't work if you don't get paid. And if you don't get paid, what's the point of being, right? So when we think about obligational growth, usually what happens is that, and the passage of scripture I went from, and if y'all want to, it's Exodus 1, verses 13 through 22. I'm saying off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure that's right. Exodus 1, 15 through 22. And for obligational growth, not for obligational, but oppressional growth, I was in the from verses 1 to 14. So I just went to the second part of this to go to part 2 of this. So if you want to go back and read that part, it pretty much talks about how the Egyptians came became oppressed by the new Pharaoh that did not know Joseph, and so on and so forth, and how they continue to grow, which is where that sermon part came from. So, and I'm going to paraphrase it, y'all can go back and read. So in verses 15 through 21, 22, what happens is that now that the Pharaoh has realized that by oppressing the Jewish people and with vigorous work and enslaving them, he's not stopping them from growing. So now he figures, okay, if I can't stop them through oppressing them, I'm going to stop them through murder and abortion. So basically, actually just murder because the babies were already born. What he tells the Hebrew midwives is, he say, listen, when the Hebrew women are having their children, kill the boys and let the girls live. Now, if you think about that, you have to go back into the first part where the original reason he wanted to oppress them and make life hard for them, because he was afraid that if another nation rised up against the Egyptians, that the Hebrews would join allied forces with them and fight against the Egyptians and overthrow them, or when they had been overthrown, they would leave. Now, where he got this from, I don't know, fear, insecurity, whatever the case may be. Either way, it was a wicked thought that created the situation that exists now. And so now he wants the midwives to go and kill the babies as they're being born, right? Now, when we talk about an obligation, first of all, you're not being told this by your boss, not by the vice president of your company, not by the CEO, but the king, the Pharaoh, is telling you in his court, listen, when you are delivering these children, if it's a boy, kill him. Extremely harsh, wicked, demonic evil, right? The thing is this. Do they have a choice? Huh?
I mean, they always have a choice, but if they want to live, then nah.
Okay. Jazz, what do you say? Do they have a choice?
They have a choice.
Okay. CJ? They have a choice. All right. Do we always have a choice?
Yeah.
Always.
No.
Yes or no?
Yeah, it's just consequences when you.
I think so. Yeah.
Right. I don't care what it is. Even if it's a gun at your head that's telling you to denounce Jesus Christ, you got a choice. Even if it means your life ending here and beginning in heaven, It's a choice. We always have a choice. So when y'all go back and read this passage, and I'm not going to tell y'all what happened. I'm going to let y'all read that part. Please read. They had a choice, and they made a choice. And so in obligation, we have a choice. Now, how do we grow in the midst of making that choice? Every choice, every decision that we make leads us to a different destination, right? Y'all made a choice to come here today, right? Now, I don't know what's going to oppose you tomorrow, but maybe some of the things that we talked about today help you make a decision a different way you may have not made it before we talked about what we talked about, right? So you weren't obligated to come here. You made a choice to come here. Obligation will always put you in a situation where you have to make a choice that's going to determine your destination. Obligation will always put you in a situation where you have to make a decision that's going to determine your destination. In our spiritual lives, the same things always exist, because a lot of times we don't take the time to sit down and say, how does this scenario that I find myself in play out where I'm harmed, especially in relationships. Seriously in relationships, and I'm just not talking about dating, I'm talking about friends, acquaintances, everything. Everybody we tie ourselves to affect our ability to get where we're trying to go. And a lot of times, what happens is that the people that we tie ourselves to, we become what? To obligated.